During Sunday services, she was the quiet preacher's daughter in the front pew, her voice barely a whisper during hymns. Her fellow congregants at New Hope Baptist Church called her the shy Houston girl. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and when she did, her voice was soft, almost apologetic. But when the church doors closed, something extraordinary happened. This reserved young woman transformed into someone completely different. In 1979, a ghost was wandering through Newark's underground R&B scene. Her name was Whitney Houston, and every single night she stood in the audience watching a group called Harmony perform. And every single night she went home with the same thought burning in her mind. That should be me on that stage. Marcus Williams and David Thompson, the core members of Harmony, had started noticing this persistent fan. She showed up at every concert, always standing in the same spot near the back, always staring at the stage with those intense, beautiful eyes. After shows, she would linger near the exit and whisper the same thing. "Y'all are great, but I could make this even better." Marcus and David would smile politely and wonder to themselves, "Can this church girl even sing?" They had no idea that the answer to that question would change the course of music history forever. Because hidden inside that quiet preacher's daughter was the greatest voice R&B would ever witness. If you're new to this channel and love untold stories from music history, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. What you're about to hear is a story of rejection, perseverance, and the birth of a legend. But before we get to that life-changing moment, we need to go back to where it all began. August 9th, 1963. In Newark, New Jersey, a girl named Whitney Elizabeth Houston was born into a musical dynasty that she didn't yet understand. Her mother, Cissy Houston, was already a legend in gospel circles, having sung backup for Aretha Franklin, Elvis Presley, and countless other stars. Her father, John Russell Houston Jr., was a former Army serviceman and entertainment executive who dreamed of a stable, respectable life for his daughter. They wanted Whitney to follow the family tradition: gospel music, church service, and a quiet life dedicated to God. Secular music was not part of the plan, but young Whitney had other ideas. Even as a small child, she was drawn to the radio in ways that worried her deeply religious family. She would sit for hours listening to Diana Ross and Gladys Knight, memorizing not just melodies, but every vocal run, every breath, every emotional nuance. At age 11, Whitney made her first public performance at New Hope Baptist Church. She sang "Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah," and something magical happened. The entire congregation fell silent. Then they erupted in applause and tears. People said they had never heard anything like it from someone so young. Her mother, Cissy, watched from the front row with pride and concern. Pride because her daughter clearly had the gift. Concern because she recognized something dangerous in Whitney's voice, a secular hunger that gospel alone might never satisfy. Have you ever felt torn between who you're supposed to be and who you really are? Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced this kind of inner conflict. The years that followed were a constant battle between expectation and desire. Whitney excelled in school, sang in the church choir, and appeared to be the perfect preacher's daughter. But inside, she was studying every secular artist she could find. She memorized Donna Summer's disco anthems and Chaka Khan's funk masterpieces, practicing them quietly in her bedroom when no one was listening. In 1978, at age 15, Whitney discovered something that would change everything. While walking through Newark's downtown area, she heard music coming from a small club called the Blue Note. The sign outside read, "Harmony, tonight only." Something pulled her toward those doors. Harmony was a 5-piece R&B group that had been trying to make it for 3 years. Marcus Williams played keyboards and handled most of the arrangements. He was a Juilliard dropout who had chosen street music over classical training. David Thompson was their drummer, a pre-med student at Rutgers who played weekend gigs to pay for college. Their current lead vocalist was Gloria Stevens, a 22-year-old with a powerful voice but limited range. Whitney stood outside the Blue Note for 20 minutes, gathering courage. She had never been in a secular music venue. She had never disobeyed her parents so directly. But something about the music flowing through those doors called to her soul in ways that Sunday hymns never had. When she finally entered, the room was electric. Harmony was in the middle of their set, and Gloria was singing a cover of "Love to Love You, Baby." The music was intoxicating. The energy was infectious. and Whitney felt something awaken inside her that had been sleeping her entire life. From that night forward, Whitney became Harmony's most devoted fan. She attended every performance she could, always positioning herself in the back corner where her parents' friends wouldn't see her. After shows, she would find her way near the band and offer suggestions. "That harmony in the bridge could be tighter," she would whisper to Marcus. "The lighting needs to change during the slow songs," she would tell David. "Gloria's got power, but she's missing the soul connection," she would say, not realizing how bold these observations were from a 16-year-old church girl. Marcus and David found her fascinating but puzzling. Who was this polite young woman with the expensive clothes and perfect diction, telling them how to improve their R&B show? But they also couldn't deny that her suggestions were often surprisingly insightful. If you're enjoying this journey through music history, please take a moment to subscribe. Your support helps us continue bringing these incredible untold stories to life. In late 1978, Whitney and David Thompson became unlikely friends. David had noticed this mysterious fan who showed up everywhere, and he was curious about her story. One night after a show, he approached her. "You know a lot about music for someone who looks like she just came from church," David said with a smile. Whitney laughed, covering her mouth self-consciously. "Maybe I did," she replied. They began talking regularly after shows. David learned that Whitney was Sissy Houston's daughter, which explained her musical knowledge. Whitney learned that David was torn between medicine and music, just like she was torn between gospel and secular life. "You ever think about singing?" David asked her one night. Whitney's heart stopped. "I sing," she said quietly. "In church." "No," David said. "I mean really singing. Like this. Like what moves people on Saturday night, not just Sunday morning." But what Whitney didn't tell David was that she had been practicing. Late at night in her bedroom, with a pillow pressed against her door to muffle the sound, she would sing along to Aretha Franklin and Diana Ross records. She would attempt the vocal runs that made audiences scream, the emotional climaxes that brought grown people to tears. Spring of 1979 brought devastating news for Harmony. Gloria Stevens had grown frustrated with the group's lack of commercial success. 3 years of small clubs and minimal pay had worn her down. She made the difficult decision to leave Harmony and join a more established group that had offered her better money and a chance to record. Marcus and David were crushed. Without their lead vocalist, Harmony was effectively finished. They sat in their rehearsal space, the basement of Marcus's mother's house, wondering if they should give up on music entirely. That's when Whitney appeared at the basement door. She had been waiting for this moment without even knowing it. She looked at Marcus and David and said something they would never forget. "Don't give up now. Let me sing." What happened next has been burned into both men's memories for over 4 decades. Marcus later admitted that when Whitney first offered to sing for them, he was skeptical. She was so proper, so church-trained, that he wondered if she could handle the raw emotion of R&B. David had similar doubts. He said they thought Whitney was sweet and knowledgeable, but they genuinely didn't know if she could deliver the kind of performance their music demanded. But they decided to give her a chance. Marcus sat at his electric piano and played the opening chords to "Natural Woman," not the church version, but the raw, secular arrangement that Aretha had made famous. David picked up his drumsticks, and Whitney stepped up to the microphone. The transformation was instantaneous and almost supernatural. The quiet preacher's daughter disappeared completely. In her place stood someone else entirely, someone who commanded the room with a presence that defied explanation. When Whitney opened her mouth and began to sing, the basement seemed to expand. Her voice filled every corner, every crevice, every molecule of air in that small space. But it wasn't just the power. It was the soul, the emotion, the way she could make you feel every word as if she was singing directly to your heart. "You make me feel like a natural woman," Whitney sang, and the way she delivered those words made it clear that she understood something about life and love and pain that no 16-year-old should understand. Marcus stopped playing piano halfway through the first verse. He just sat there, staring, his mouth open. David dropped his drumsticks and forgot to close his mouth. The sound they were hearing was not of this world. Years later, Marcus would describe that moment as the day music changed forever in that basement. David would say that despite his initial skepticism, he immediately realized they were witnessing something that comes along maybe once in a generation. But the most incredible part wasn't just Whitney's voice. It was the way she moved, the way she connected with the music, the way she seemed to channel something divine through something completely secular. She had taken everything she had learned in church, the passion, the emotion, the spiritual connection, and transformed it into something that could move people in ways they never expected. The audition lasted only one song, but it was enough. Whitney Houston was in the band. But Whitney wasn't content to simply replace Gloria. She wanted to create something entirely new. One of her first suggestions was to change their approach completely. Harmony is a good name, she said, but we need to be more than just harmony. We need to be a voice that people remember. She proposed they rename themselves Legacy, something that spoke to lasting impact rather than just musical arrangement. Marcus and David were hesitant at first, but Whitney was persuasive in ways they hadn't expected. She explained that Legacy represented what they were trying to build: music that would outlast them, performances that would stay with people forever. It was a name that carried weight, that suggested importance. Legacy now had a lead singer, but they still needed to prove themselves. Their first performance with Whitney was at a small club in East Orange, New Jersey. Word had gotten out that Harmony had a new singer, and maybe 30 people showed up, mostly friends and family. Whitney stepped onto that tiny stage wearing a simple white dress that her mother had bought for church. She looked nervous, almost scared. But the moment the music started, everything changed. She opened with Respect, Aretha's version, not the Otis Redding original. But what came out of Whitney's mouth was neither Aretha's version nor anyone else's. It was pure Whitney Houston, and it was magnificent. The small crowd was mesmerized. People stopped talking, stopped drinking, stopped everything except listening. By the end of the first song, everyone in that club knew they were witnessing something special. Marcus later recalled watching Whitney during that first performance and thinking, "This is what we've been waiting for our entire lives." David remembered being behind the drums and feeling like he was part of something historic. But the most touching part of that night was what happened after the show. Whitney came off stage and immediately called her mother from the club's payphone. "Mama," she said, tears in her eyes, "I think I found what God wants me to do with my voice." Sissy Houston drove to that club in East Orange and saw her daughter perform for the first time outside of church. Later, Sissy would say that she knew that night that Whitney was destined for something far beyond what any of them had imagined. Over the following months, Legacy began building a reputation throughout New Jersey and New York. Whitney's voice was becoming legendary in local music circles. Promoters started booking them specifically because word was spreading about that Houston girl who could sing like an angel but move like a goddess. But Whitney never forgot where she came from. Despite her growing success with Legacy, she continued singing in church every Sunday. She never missed a service, never missed an opportunity to honor the foundation that had given her everything. What made Whitney special during those early days wasn't just her incredible talent, it was her character. She remembered everyone's name, from the club owners to the sound technicians. She was generous with her time and attention, often staying after shows to talk with fans who just wanted to tell her how her music had moved them. Looking back at Whitney's origin story with Legacy, what stands out most is the courage it took to step into that basement and say, "Let me sing." She could have spent her entire life as the quiet church girl, singing hymns and living the safe life her parents had planned. Instead, she chose to risk everything for the chance to share her gift with the world. That single moment of courage, grabbing that microphone and transforming from Whitney the church girl into Whitney the artist, changed not just her life, but the lives of everyone who would ever hear her voice. Thank you for watching this story of dreams, faith, and the birth of a legend. Subscribe to join our community and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between safety and your dreams? The shy girl from Newark who sang quietly in church became the voice that would inspire millions around the world. Sometimes the greatest transformations happen not over years, but in a single moment when someone finds the courage to say, "Let me sing." Until next time, keep believing in the power of your voice.